Right. So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for keep tuning in into these podcasts and for hopefully one day sending us emails and ideas about what you'd like us to unpick and unpack in terms of assessments and assessment writing, academic styles, and all sorts of things like that. Now, today we've got with us Louise Nielsen. Hi, Louise.
Morning, Eleanor. Thank you ever so much
Hi.
for inviting me today, and thank you for all the great work you're doing on ACER assessments.
A pleasure to have you, Louise. A pleasure to have you. Now, Louise, you're a senior lecturer at the MU and you're teaching family law, IPLS, and also taught. But
Equity,
you're also
Eleanor. Equity.
taught.
Equity. No,
Oh,
not
right.
taught.
Okay. Well, I had
Equity.
I, the moment I said taught, I said, but you are not on the taught team because I am on the taught team and it's
And I'm on the
equity.
equity
I
team.
read it wrongly. I apologize.
I
Taught
could
in
teach
my
taught, though. I
language.
could teach taught, Eleanor, though, because I was in personal injury practice, so it's fine. But don't have that one on the
Yes,
record
yes.
if the boss is listening.
But I was just going to say, taught in my language means cake, so that is my excuse,
That
maybe.
sounds good. A Saka taught or something like that.
So, yes, like you said, you are a former barrister. You were specializing in family and personal injury as well. And you said you were doing some criminal law every now and then, so long as it was next to a really good shopping center.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. That's one of my vices. I'm afraid shopping, but now we can indulge in that online as well. So that's even more dangerous.
I know. You just have to rock up and, yeah, whip up your phone. Now, I always ask our guests to tell us something interesting about themselves, but not necessarily interesting, but just something that they wouldn't mind sharing with the students. So, do you want to tell us something about yourself that they don't know yet?
Well, they might not know that I'm a skier, and the reason I'm a skier, I've skied since I was 2 years old, and that might sound quite young to most people, but that was my father's business. So my surname is the name of a tour operator in the UK, which has specialised in skiing for many, many years. So I was on skis by the age of two. I think absolutely terrifying my parents because back then helmets weren't standard, and I used to go down everything just straight because I wanted to go fast, faster and faster and faster. So I was one of the few children at that point who did have a helmet because my father managed to find one that would fit such a young child because I was such a demon on skis.
Oh gosh.
Now I'm just a poser on skis. I'm less of a demon, more of a poser.
Okay, I was going to ask, has anything changed? Do you still want to go faster, faster, faster?
No, I think as you reach adulthood, then I'm afraid the fear kicks in, and when you
It
become a
does.
parent, the fear kicks in even more, and you're more worried about them than yourself.
And lead by example as well. No, be very careful. Look how I do it.
Yes,
Not how
yes,
I did it before.
yes, yes. Yeah,
Now,
do what I do, not what you see.
oh, yes, yes, exactly. Now, we are here today to, as I said, we're on podcast 16,
Wow.
and we're here to talk about how to stay academic. So, we're going to go into tips for avoiding academic misconduct. So, why is it that this topic is important? And obviously, tell us what is, academic misconduct? What are we talking about, Louise?
Well, recently the university has changed the wording to call it academic misconduct. Up until this year, we've always called it academic offences. And to be honest, as lawyers, that's perhaps easier to understand because we can see in that you've got the act and you've got the mental element to it. And you have both of those in terms of what we now call academic misconduct. It's when you are trying to take advantage of a situation to put yourself in a better position than other students. So, for example, if you have an exams, let's say a multiple choice test, which we know is coming up for some of our students, If you were to take a set of notes into that exam, which you're not allowed to do, by the way, then that would be putting you at an advantage, an unfair advantage to other students. And in fact, those sitting a multiple choice exam face to face over the course of this year may know that they're sitting it face to face because of some academic misconduct that happened a few years ago, which was a group of students who formed a WhatsApp group to share answers on that. And I'm afraid now, if students think, well, it's unfair, we're having to take it face to face, they can blame their predecessors, because if we find that there's a problem, we will fix it. So that's in terms of academic misconduct. We've also got what's now known as poor academic practice, which used to be called bad academic practice. It's when you have the act, but you don't have the mental element. So to put it in lawyers' terms, there's an actus reus, but there's no mens rea. They don't know that by now. They will know if they're first years once they get onto criminal law. For our second and third years, those terms should be quite familiar by now. It's when somebody does something that is not as culpable, but they have not followed the best practice. So we want to set them on the right path. And in general, that's dealt with by module teams, not by me as academic practice officer. It's generally dealt with by the module teams. But sometimes I will see a student and realise, actually, we're that side of the line. So we'll call it poor academic practice. Why is it important? Well, many reasons. Let's start with, first of all, that you need to follow good academic practice to get the best results at university. People might think, yes, but if I take a shortcut, I'll have a better outcome. Anybody who engages in misconduct may be lucky enough to get away with it. If you walk into a shop and you shoplift, I never have, by the way, but if you walk into a shop and you shoplift, then you may well get away with it. But a lot of people don't. And we can't catch everybody. But if you are caught, not only will that have a real impact on your degree classification, or even lead you to being expelled from the university, but as maybe we'll talk about later, it can have an effect on you in terms of your professional career. Because as lawyers, and we're both barristers, as lawyers, honesty and integrity is a key part. And cheating is not honest.
You don't want to have that dragging around you, because it will follow you in the future. So
Absolutely.
if we are to then, it's a difficult situation, isn't it? Some students may not do it intentionally necessarily. So, what are some common types, let's say, of academic misconduct? Because they might not even realize their violations.
Absolutely right. And I think sometimes, especially for our very honest, very good students, they worry overly that they might be overstepping a line, and it causes them some anxiety. We absolutely don't want that. We're here to support at every stage of the journey. And that's how you can ace your assessments, with our support. The one that students think of first of all is plagiarism. And in fact, if you look at a lot of, for example, the Bar Standards Board, when they talk about cheating, the first thing they mention is plagiarism. But plagiarism is a drop in the ocean. Now, what do I mean by plagiarism? Well, it's things like copying and pasting from another document, with either changing no words, or actually even more culpably, changing the odd word. So I often give the example, if you said the man ran down the road, the male person jogged down the street. That's not yours. You've just changed the odd word to try and make it yours. You've got to explain it in a different way. But plagiarism now forms a very, very small part of the cases that I will see. What forms a big part is the use of AI, which we'll probably come back to in more detail later, I suspect, because I want to go into that in a bit more detail. It's getting other people to help you. Now, that could be one of these companies that sells essays. Or it could be, which you don't buy, by the way, just a spoiler alert on that one.
Yeah.
Or it could be getting friends, family, acquaintances to help you. Again, no, this is your work.
Yeah.
Collusion is another one. And people sometimes worry, what's the difference between collaboration and collusion? Well, collusion is where you are either using somebody else's work pretty much in its entirety, changing the odd word again, or you are working on a brief together that you're not allowed to work on together. You can talk about it in advance in terms of, this is on negligence. Oh, where do we need to start for negligence? Then you go away and you write it yourself. You research and you apply
Yes.
for yourself. So collusion is a big one. And it can cause a lot of problems because students think they're helping their friends by giving them work. So, for example, sharing it electronically. Never. A friend who says, I'll just have a quick look at it, don't worry. If they're in a tricky situation, well, they know they'll probably copy great big parts. If you think I've already had mine marked because the friend, for example, is doing an in-year retrieval, that's even worse because then they know the quality of the work that they've got. And the giver is as guilty as the receiver. So if your friend has a problem and asks you to help with their work, you send them back to us. That's our job. We're here to help. We're here to support.
Yeah.
So there's some standard types, and I've mentioned the WhatsApp group already.
Yeah.
In terms of sharing answers, I don't mean the general student WhatsApp groups where they communicate, or other methods are available, Snapchat, etc., where they communicate with one another to say when's the lecture on. That's absolutely fine. Of course, that's fine. But when it's sharing answers, that's not fine.
We're talking about an actual exam and giving yourselves the advantage by sharing the answers. But I
Exactly.
suppose a very good point that you made there about students being able to, or we actually encourage students to talk to other students in their class about, for example, a problem question. So you question yourself, your thinking, but also putting yourself in a situation where you're able to explain the question. It means that you have actually understood it, and you can pick on, the mistakes, errors, or things that are uh, mentioned by your peers. So it's a good experience to have. And I always say to my students to have a study buddy because it really does help. If you have a chat over the phone with them about an assessment that you're doing. But yes, all of it has to be done before you're actually starting to write. It has to be your
Exactly. Right.
work.
Exactly.
Yes,
That's
yes.
the point. Yeah. So
So why do
you've
you think
identified
then?
collaboration and collusion there, which is what the big difference
Yeah.
is.
I was going to ask you why you think they sometimes struggle to stay within the guidelines because um, obviously it's sometimes you've got situations of unintentional violation. So what can
Absolutely
you tell
right.
us about that?
I always categorize students into two parts, sad and bad.
Oh,
So students who genuinely want to cheat, want to beat the system, want to gain an unfair advantage, and don't really care. They're the bad students. And there's
mm,
very few of those. Very, very few. Most cases, it's a sad situation. Somebody is under time pressure for a particular reason, or there are external pressures. Um, they may have been poorly. All of those things can impact, and they take a shortcut, a bad shortcut, rather than coming to talk to us and say, I'm struggling, what can I do? Which is always the right thing to do. Reaching out is always the
mm,
right thing to do. So I think it is other pressures that can push students the most, and they may actually be peer pressures. They may be other students saying, oh, yes, I'm finding this really easy, and oh, why aren't you? Well, I think we both know from our experience that the person who used to come out of the exam saying, "Oh, I got all that right, I'm sure I got all that right," probably didn't. They're
Yeah.
just better at bravado. So
I had
don't
the
put
same
them through peer
experience. So
pressure.
I think all of us at some point in our lives when we were doing our degrees, we had someone like that, and that even
Absolutely.
creates, I remember I had that sort of situation where people would come out of the exam, and we're talking about the 3 hour sit down, no, nothing about what's coming up, kind of exam, and then you'll come out thinking, oh, I'm not so sure that I've answered exactly on the problem question or on the essay question, but you've got a few coming out, oh, I've done this and I've done that and I've aced it, and yeah, it's not great.
So don't
No.
fall for the peer pressure. Don't
Mm,
feel, it's the good old imposter syndrome. Don't feel like an imposter. You've got
yeah,
just as much right to be at university as everybody else in the classroom. You've done just as well to
exactly.
get here. Um,
Yes, yes,
and then
correct.
family pressure as well can sometimes um, cause our students problems, whether it's in terms of succeeding, the pressure to succeed, to do better, or the
Mm,
fact that families, that life happens and that there are issues going on in the family which are distracting students from their studies at the time. So that's really why I see people are generally struggling um,
well, so
to
can you
stay
give us
within.
then some practical steps for them to actually avoid
Yeah.
situations like this, especially when you've got time pressure and everything?
So time management is key, and we in class, and this is about attending. So start off with attendance, because if you are in the seminars, we are there to help guide you through so that the time pressure becomes less on you, because we're giving you tips every week in terms of how to manage your assessments. Now, I appreciate that some people may say, well, hang on, I've got a problem at home, which has meant I haven't been able to come in. So, if that's the case, communicate with us. If you become
Mm,
a ghost in class, then we don't know if you just aren't coming because you've got problems, you've
mm.
got family pressures, or you just can't be bothered to get out of bed. We've all been students. We do know the late nights that happen for various reasons, and that
Yes.
sometimes getting out of bed for a 9 o'clock seminar is not hugely appealing. I should say, where one of my sons was at university, they used to have 8:30 starts, which was particularly cruel. So we're really
Wow.
nice. We're really nice in comparison. Um, but it can be something as simple as that or much more complicated. But by managing your time or talking to us if you are struggling with managing your time, that will definitely assist you. It's
I see.
always best to investigate if you are struggling and you think you really can't get it done. Think about applying for an extension. That's not because you've been out partying too hard. You're not going to get one for that, I'm afraid. But if, sorry to burst your bubble on that one. Um, but if there has been a genuine health issue, as an example, or a crisis that has been reached, then the teams that deal with the extensions are human as well. They will understand and they will look at it sensibly. And if an extension is just not going to cut it, think about applying for a deferral or even pausing your studies. And the team in faculty, the Ask Bal team, and they've got their own dedicated web page. So if you just Google Ask Bal, ASKBAL, and then DMU, then it comes up as a link. And there are brilliant student support workers. They're the people who are based at reception in Hugh Aston. So you can physically go to Hugh Aston and ask to speak to one of those workers. And they will not only help you with any struggles that you have, but they'll also be able to guide you through those processes. So the most important thing is, if you feel you are falling into that trap of thinking the only way out of this is cheating, then talk to us, talk to the student support team, and we will help you come up with a solution.
I like that. I think the students do need to know that we are there to help them. We're not there to. I think there's this traditional view about very unfriendly types of tutors or lecturers. So we're not like that. It's not, we're not living 20 years. It was different. It was that's the reality. But no, this is we're there. We're here for you. We've got a
Absolutely.
job because you are there. And I always say to all of my students, use us. We are a well of information. We have been where you are several times, depending on whether or not you've had other degrees and but you've seen it, if you've been in academia long enough, you've seen it over and over and over with students, and life happens. We just have to deal with it. So approach us, we are there for you. We're not the
Absolutely.
baddies. We're the goodies. We're the people that you can approach and tell us about your issues, and we will send you to the best. Signpost you if we can't help you. But yes, it's about you succeeding in the proper way to
Absolutely.
actually,
We're
gain the
definitely more Little Red
recognition.
Riding Hood. We're definitely more Little Red Riding Hood than Big Bad Wolf.
Yes, exactly. And we have our basket full of everything that we need to have it full of.
Exactly.
So, in terms of resources, then, any
Mm.
online resources that they can use? I'm not saying give us some examples, but how can they use online resources to make sure that they're still not committing any academic misconduct whatsoever?
So think about firstly how you're researching, because students have a tendency to start with Google or whichever one of their search engines they happen to use. I use Google, so I'm going to say Google.
Yeah.
But at our stage, we've got the ability to differentiate between what's good and bad when it appears on Google. As an
Yes.
undergraduate, you don't have that ability to differentiate. So the university subscribes to Westlaw, to Lexis, to Practical Law. They need to become a student's Google, effectively. Go there first because they are good quality resources. Articles are peer reviewed, so we know that they are of a certain standard, and the law is correct on there. So that should always be your starting point in research, beyond, of course, your lecture and your seminar notes, because they are crucially important. Because unlike GCSEs, unlike A levels, the people who teach you on your degree are the ones who set the tests. So the work we are teaching you is specifically designed towards the test you'll get at the end. It's not just a hope that the GCSE teachers look at a biology paper and think, oh, did that topic come up this year? We know what's coming up because we wrote it. So take those little hints. That's why coming to class and engaging in lectures and doing the preparation beforehand is invaluable. So where you research on from that is really important, and also where you don't research. So, dare I say it, law teacher. So, law teacher is complete rubbish in general. Um,
Yeah.
it's got so much wrong. I've looked particularly at materials they've had on family law, and I put my head in my hands because it's all so horribly wrong. E-law resources, same thing again. Stu Docu, or however you say it, I'm never quite sure how you say that one. Yes, they do upload all sorts of things from various universities. They might be 20 years old. And indeed, they've not been done with the author's consent. So you shouldn't be looking at them in the first place. And I should tell you as well, just so that students know, that a new type of academic misconduct that's been introduced at the university is uploading work to social media. So
Yes.
don't do it. in the
Yes.
first place. So using the right resources, not the wrong resources. Wikipedia, if you want to have a look at who's just joined or who's about to join I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, that's fine because it really doesn't matter. It probably matters to them and their bank balance, but it really doesn't matter in life. It's not going to change your life. But looking up a piece of law on Wikipedia, and remember, anyone can contribute to Wikipedia. That's not a good idea.
Exactly. Exactly. And
Not a
it's
good
not like
idea.
it's checked, it's not fact checked, it's not you. The thing is, like you say, if you want to find out just something rudimentary, then that's fine. It doesn't matter where you're looking. It's up to you. It's your personal life. But you are doing a law degree, and so there is a certain level of expectation that we're expecting from you. And
Yeah.
so the best places are the tried and tested for law resources, online or otherwise. So yes, go to those. But then so we found a journal article, for example, on Westlaw. We found a case, and we want to use it. Some students struggle with paraphrasing. They don't understand how to
Mhm.
paraphrase in the first place, but also what do they do after that? Because some, again, forget to reference that piece of information, and this is how they sometimes get into trouble.
Yeah, absolutely right. So I talk about it as finding your own voice. It's all very well doing a cover effectively, which is what failing to paraphrase properly is, but it's about writing your own tune is what we want them to do. We want to
Mm,
hear a student explain a concept in a way that it is clear to us that they understand it. And students often think, but I've just read Rebecca Probert, she's a family lawyer, Rebecca Probert's article on marriage. And obviously, Rebecca Probert is going to explain this better than I can because Rebecca Probert is a professor. She's been doing this for years and years and years. But it's not about how Rebecca Probert phrases it, it's not how she explains it. It's about you, the writer, explaining it in a way so that me, the reader, can
mm,
understand it and know that you understand it. So it's not about changing the odd word. It's about giving the whole context and explaining it. And I'll often give a very silly example to students in academic practice hearings, which is based around a nursery rhyme. So Jack and Jill went up the hill. So Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. If they've never heard of that, you can just Google that one. It won't be on Westlaw or
yeah.
Lexis. But for me
Mm,
to explain that in my own words so that I know I understand it and my reader knows how I understand it, it's something along the lines of, and every time I do this differently because you would, because you're human. There was a boy called Jack and a girl called Jill. They decided to go for a walk. They took a bucket with them, but they fell over and they spilt the water and hurt their head. I've not, I would still then reference the original source because that is not my original idea. So I would
exactly.
still have a footnote in. Please don't use nursery rhymes in law essays, everybody. But I would still have a footnote in to the original source because it isn't my idea, but I have explained it. And that's really important. It's finding your own voice, referencing and explaining yourself. Do not use paraphrasing tools such as Quillbot. That will get you into a bad place and back with me. And I can't tell you some of the ridiculous synonyms that have been
Yes.
found by such online tools because they're not human. They don't look at it to see if it understands. It's like translation apps. They're a
Yes.
lot better than they used to be, but even they aren't infallible.
Mm, exactly. Uh, but also, like you were saying earlier, it is in the end, if you're using any of these, it is content generator. and you're not to use those. It's very, very clear that at the moment this is how things are. Maybe 10 years from now, 5 years from now, even, say 10 years, like now it's probably 1, 2 years from now, you might have pieces of assessment that will encourage you to use AI, but this is where we are at the moment. So make sure that you're actually
No AI at
moving
the
with.
moment.
Yes, exactly. So you started telling us about the footnotes, and obviously Oscola referencing is what is, um, the style that we're using in law, and we've got any odd a student listening to this, first year, second year, third year, master's student, doesn't matter. We need to make sure that they also understand the referencing, this particular referencing style. So, any common pitfalls to avoid?
Well, the way to avoid the common pitfalls is actually listening to your sessions on Oscola referencing, and going along to any of the workshops you're doing. So that I'm doing your advert for you because I've I've
Thank you.
I've listened to the session. It's fantastic. The one that's uploaded, and going to the sessions you're running. Is it once a month, Eleanor?
Yes, it is. So the monthly Ascona workshop runs every second Wednesday of every month. If there are any changes, there'll be details posted, but they can find, they've got a link. They can find us in the law lab. They go to student success coaches in the academic skills tab, and that's where the monthly Oscola workshop is. It's got a link that takes you to this online meeting that I hold for 1 hour, so you can come with your referencing needs, and this is why we're there. It's from 10 to 11 a.m. in the morning. But you know me, and you can send me an email if you need any help. I've had students emailing me about their urgent stuff in the past. So yeah, but at least we're running these once a month. So like you said, we don't need to talk about it much, but it's good to know about these things. Yes.
No, I think it's a brilliant initiative, and it adds on to, if you go onto DMU Law Library, then there's a whole section there which just gives you some tabs and examples of how you reference, and it can demystify it for students. We want them to get it right, but the most important thing is that they've tried to get it right, and that we can look and see, where has this come from. And it's really important, therefore, when you are putting your piece of work together, to keep a list of the references whilst you go through, not try and cobble it all together at the end, because you won't remember what you've looked at. So keep a list as you go through, whether that's a paper list if you're a paper person, whether it's another document on your computer if you're a computer person, but keep that list as you go through.
Well, I'm always sort of saying just references as you go. I mean, as you're writing it, because it's quite a job to do it afterwards. So if you can do it at the beginning, I cringe when I hear people saying I'll do it all at the end, because it is going to be a struggle, and you're creating really good habits as well if you're starting to do it like that. So you're not missing. You're benefiting from it in the long run. Um, but let's talk about a student that is realizing that they've just, maybe happened, and maybe, and unintentionally they have committed an academic offense, academic misconduct. What can they do? Is there a self-reporting process? Is there something that they can, just to mitigate circumstances?
Absolutely. And I think that self-awareness is a really important thing. Firstly, don't panic. Don't panic. Um, you can always contact me, or the other APO is Rachel Litter. You can contact one of us via email, and our emails are widely available. You can contact one of us. You can, if you're struggling and you think, I can't contact them, I'm too scared, contact your personal tutor first, or your subject tutor, somebody you feel
Mm.
comfortable with in the law school, and ask them to approach us. But honesty is always the best policy. There's no specific process, I'm afraid. But honesty is always the best policy, telling the truth from the beginning. And if somebody does find themselves in an academic practice hearing with me, that's the first thing I actually say to them. However difficult the truth is, if you tell me the truth from the beginning, this will go as well as it can do. It might be that a student has totally blown up in their own mind something that they actually haven't done, and then we can reassure them. And if there is an issue there, by self-reporting, then that will get them the best possible outcome. So yes, that's the right thing to do. But please, and that takes away the stress as well. I think I've had many students who've almost been relieved to come to the academic practice hearing because the spectre's been hanging over them, because they know they've done something wrong and they're waiting to see if they're going to get caught.
Oh, it's not a very pretty situation to be in. It's uncomfortable for us as well, isn't it? We don't want that for them. We really, really don't want you guys to get to that point where you need to knock on Louise's door because you've got one such appointment. But how do we feel about when about things when students know about someone else
Mm-hmm.
that may have been committed something?
I think that's really important. And students are often reluctant because they think, oh, I'll be seen as a grass, to put it in general language. But the important thing is to let us know, either myself or Rachel directly, or if they feel they can't do that, to contact their personal tutor. We will still investigate the case independently, because I have in the past had situations where people have tried to throw others under the bus a little bit for no reason.
Oh,
There are issues where people have personal gripes and they can use that as a process. So I will investigate independently. I've also had situations where students have let me know, and that has allowed me to investigate and get to the bottom of really quite serious issues. That student who's reported is not brought into the process. They remain anonymous. Even in some of the biggest cases I've had, they have always remained anonymous.
mm,
And it's important because if you know that others are cheating or others are claiming, so we're back to our exam point again here, Eleanor, when people
mm,
come out and brag after exams, people sometimes brag
yes,
that they've cheated. I know it's not something really to brag about, but they brag that they've cheated when they haven't, which is why we have to investigate it.
yeah,
But what if people are going out of the university having cheated with effectively fraudulent degree results? And
mm,
let's say they get a first and you get a 2-1 and they get the job and you don't. They're going to come a cropper in the job because they're not going to know anything. But that
mm,
equally has a knock-on effect. That employer is going to think in the future, oh, where did they go to university? Oh, no, I had somebody from there before and they didn't know anything about this. They won't know that they've
mm,
cheated to get there. So it's about the value of your own degree. And in fact, in the expulsion cases that I'm involved in, which is when I'm effectively the magistrate's court, to put it on that level. And if a case is really
yes,
serious, it goes to a university panel who are like the Crown Court.
mm,
And I sit on those panels for other faculties. I can't sit on them for our own students, but for other faculties. And one of the other people who sits on those panels is student union rep, somebody from DSU. They're always hardest on the students. They're always harder
oh,
because they think these other people are bringing my degree into disrepute. So it's really
yes,
important to report. Please let us know, and please do not worry in terms of your anonymity, and we will investigate separately as well.
yeah, that's very good. I'm glad that we went through that actually. But there's also, we've got so many international students. Any words for them because they sometimes don't catch on. I suppose maybe we do try to make space and give them a lot of information before they come here, but how yeah, how can they catch up to make sure that they adapt quick enough?
You're completely right, Eleanor. It is a totally new academic environment for people coming internationally. And we mustn't assume that they know our practices, and equally, those students mustn't assume that things that would have been allowed in their old academic institution are allowed here. So we've both got to adapt in that process. And that's why, again, I'm back to attendance, but attendance is key because
Mm.
your seminar tutors, your lecturers are there to guide you in the processes that we use. And if you've got any particular queries, then to take advice from us. I've had some really great international students who have asked specific queries, not in terms of academic practice officer, not in terms of my role as that, but as their tutor,
Mm.
their seminar tutor, so that they know what's expected of them. And there are other university resources. We've got our own in Ask Bal. Some of our student support team are particularly knowledgeable about international students and how to support them. But again, if they've got any particular concerns, then please talk to me, talk to Rachel, or if they don't feel able to, talk to their personal tutor. But it's about communication and engaging and knowing that
Mm.
we might have different rules, so they've got to adapt to them, and we've got to help them adapt to them.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that, Louise. Now, I don't know in your experience, Louise, if you've ever had students telling you that they actually sometimes get emails from all sorts of online sources, offering them to write their essays, their assessments for them.
Fortunately, yes. So there'll even be posters up in the toilet sometimes, that if I've ever seen one, I have ripped it down. Don't you worry. But yes, social media. It used to be through Facebook. There's TikTok now. There's Snapchat. However, I asked my own children, well, how on earth can people get your details? They said, oh, don't worry, they just add themselves to groups. I'm not a technical person, Eleanor,
Yeah.
so I don't quite know how they do it. But they do. There used to be people handing out leaflets in front of the university.
Oh,
Um,
right.
if we know about them and they come through to their university email, then ITMS will block those emails. But of course, they'll find another way
Yes.
around it. These services that offer to write essays for students are the equivalent of drug dealers. They're trying to
Yeah.
launder money in some way. They are. That's the bottom line. They provide. Do not take them up on their offer ever.
Yeah.
Is the clear message. They, even if you did take them up on their offer, they then are likely to blackmail you. We've had situations where our deputy dean in the faculty has been contacted by some of these companies to say student X has bought an essay from us. You need to investigate student X. And they do that because they will try and blackmail the student for more money, to try and say, if you don't give us more money, we will tell the university this. Sometimes they sell essays for ridiculously small amounts, the price of a couple of coffees. Well, you can imagine the quality of that. It's not great. And the consequence of using such a service is ordinarily expulsion. So you get no degree. It
Yes.
isn't, it is not worth it on any level. And the rubbish I've seen produced is quite remarkable. One of the references once, how to become a monastic superior, so a monk. It was on a question about trusts. Not particularly relevant. Neither was the one about beekeepers,
Oh,
or
yes, I remember.
how to train a working dog, which was linked to how judicial training. I don't think a judge would
Yeah.
want to think of themselves as a working dog. So the ridiculousness that comes up it's great. It gives me a bit of a laugh, but I'd
Yeah.
rather not have the laugh.
We're only talking about these because we're both aware of them because we taught on equity and we teaching on equity, not for any other reason. We
No,
don't just send an oh God, CC all email to tell you
no, no,
about
no,
the
no. We both.
latest.
It
But
was
yeah,
one that
that's
you'd
fine.
referred. It was one you'd
That's why we
referred.
know about these. But yeah, so this is one of them, and then what about AI? I think we said maybe we'll bring it in to talk about this as well because this is becoming quite popular.
Yes. So
as
this is
well.
the new kid on the block, effectively. So since the major launch, it's not that we haven't had generative AI before, but since the
Mm.
major launch of ChatGPT almost 2 years ago now, this has
Wow, two
been the
years.
one.
It's been a
Yeah,
while then.
it has. And obviously other products are available like Copilot, Snapchat, etc. As it stands at the moment, you must not use AI in terms of your law assessments.
Mm.
I think we've both acknowledged already that things are likely to move on in the same way. If you take maths years gone by, probably when our grandparents were doing maths, then they wouldn't have foreseen that calculators could become useful.
Yes.
Um, but now, as it stands at the moment, you must not use AI. It has to be your own work because, in general, the standard is still very poor indeed. And there are classic signs of AI, which I'm not going to tell them now because then they'll look out for them and they
Yes,
won't
I
know what I'm
know.
looking for. Sorry. But there are
No, but
classic tells,
students
shall we say.
students should also know that we actually go for training as well, to make sure that we're able, because we're the are doing the marking, so we need to be aware of these things. So when our conferences are held, it's there's a lot about AI. So this is what I this is what you shouldn't just don't use them.
And we need
Um,
to know what their understanding is, don't we? We're back to that point again. We need to know what a student understands, not what a bot understands.
yes, exactly. I mean, the the practical thing or message is to say you're going to be left off, after you finish your degree with the work that you've actually put in. Don't think that there will come a time when you're going to be able to sit down with your equity book or whatever the case may be, um, after your degree. That's not how it happens. You'll just be presumed to know what you're meant to know, and you're making it just so very difficult for yourself. And it's not just if you go in practice, because other students are also approached in that way, knowing that they have this professionalism to them and there's a certain level that they, threshold expected to from them, because they say they have a law degree. So in the same way, again, you gain out of it what you put into it. So please try and, yes, stay away, stay away. Now, we only mentioned a little bit about what can happen in
Mm.
terms of the future, if you have been caught in a situation like this, and it they get into proper trouble. Can we unpack this a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So, in terms of the university degree,
Mm.
um, the worst case scenario is expulsion.
Mm.
It could be that they are asked to repeat a year, and there are obviously financial consequences to that. And I've had students who've been asked to repeat a year and had their mark capped in that year so that they could only achieve a basic pass of 40%. So that can have
Mm.
an impact on their degree classification. And in fact, any academic offence can have an impact on your degree classification. So that's the university side, but it runs wider than that. So if you take barristers and solicitors, there are specific guidelines set out that are another hurdle in a student's case in order to become one of those particular professions. So I'll obviously start with barristers, the closest to our heart. But the Bar Standards Board sets out guidelines on who's a fit and proper person to become a barrister. And the inns, if you want to become a barrister, you have to become a member of one of the four inns of court. And in fact, only one of the four inns once you're still a student. We could belong to all four now if we wanted to, Eleanor. We probably
Yes,
don't, but we
yes.
could do. But as a student, you can only belong to one. And they've got to look at it says specifically they must look at any previous academic or disciplinary findings. And that may stop. And I am aware of a case where it has stopped a student progressing. Now, that's not to put fear into all students and say, well, if I'm found guilty of an academic offence, I'll never practice. That's not a decision we make. It's a decision based on the severity that the professional bodies make. So in terms of solicitors, it's the SRA who make that decision. But it means that you've got this spectre hanging over you. And students might think, well, you know what, if I don't tell them, then I'll be okay. You won't, because ultimately it will come out. And if it comes out, and at that point you've effectively defrauded your professional body as well, that's it, that's career ending. So even if you might have jumped that hurdle at an earlier stage, if you fail to mention something that you may later rely on in evidence, as they say elsewhere, then I'm afraid that's the end of it. So it's a big deal. So again, honesty and integrity.
It's a difficult situation. I mean, I remember even as a student myself, before I became aware and learned about a SCOLA and the referencing and how you can make sure that you're not in any way stepping on the wrong pebbles. I had this fear because I didn't know how do I know that nobody has written this before? How do you and just especially when you work as part of a group, because I was hoping we can move on to talking about collusion now. Um, we could talk about other things, but let's just move because I'm mindful of how much time you have on this as well. Um, we always encourage students to work together on different points and different tasks. So how do we make sure that they 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 don't go into the misconduct, on that side of the fence?
So it's about any planning of work, and by that I mean the actual specifics of the work, not just talking about the question, unpacking the question. Unpacking the question is fine, but then you go away. So with another is fine, unpacking the question. But unless you've specifically been told it's group work in the assessment criteria, you go away, you plan the structure, you do the research, and you write it by yourself. That's what's really important in terms of falling the right side of the line. And in terms of students worrying about their references and when they're going to be referred to me, I would say that is the tiniest proportion, because as lecturers, I think we give students the benefit of the doubt for trying to reference correctly. And we're not going to refer students to the academic practice officer just because they've got that a little bit wrong.
Exactly.
It might impact on the mark.
Yeah.
But so don't overstress on that one. I've got a few students at the moment who are overstressing on that. And I know they're good students. I know they're working really hard. We just want to see them try their best.
Yes. And that's what we want you guys to do. It's do the best that you can do. Nothing more, nothing less. That's why we're there to encourage you to do the best you can do.
Exactly.
What about personal circumstances? Because obviously we can have, students come to us as personal tutors or their own tutors for specific modules, and they tell us about, mental health situations, problems, and other pressures that they may have. What can you help with in terms of any support that we can give them?
I think that's really important, Eleanor, because people look at my role as academic practice officer and think I'm just there to investigate and to adjudicate. Actually, the role is much more of a counsellor, because, as I said previously, most students have not come in with a specific intent to cheat. They've had life happening, and that has caused this problem. So often it can be having to work outside of their studies. It can be financial pressures, family pressures. It can be, as you said, health issues. So what do? Start with your personal tutor, if presuming, of course, you've got a good relationship with them, which we've got some fantastic personal tutors in the university.
And if you don't, start having a relationship with your personal tutor, because they'll be your person, they'll give you a reference at the end, but they'll give you a very general one if they don't actually know anything about you. So make yourself seen, and do try to form that relationship with them as well.
I know that some people will struggle to talk about any issues that are affecting them. It may be bravado, it may be their background that means that they are less willing to talk about those sorts of things. But as you get older, you realise that offloading is an important thing. As my grandmother used to say, a problem shared is a problem halved. And
Yes.
so try to share that problem. As personal tutors, we don't have all the answers, but we know where we can find them. I've mentioned the Ask Bal team already, the student support officers in faculty. They are fantastic. Yes. De Montfort Students' Union is split into various groups, but one of the groups deals specifically with health and well-being. So if you feel more comfortable talking to the student union, that's a great resource for you. We've also got a resource called Healthy DMU. And if you just put in Healthy DMU, it will come up on Google. And it talks about spa appointments. And when I first saw it, I thought, great, hot tub, sauna, facial, not that sort of spa, I'm afraid. It stands for Single Point of Access. It's an acronym. But we've got some trained counsellors who can talk to students. And we all know now with the continuing issues in the NHS that getting an appointment, particularly for mental health issues, the waiting list, I think I last heard on the news, was 18 months long. Students are paying their university fees. They've got direct access to counsellors within the university. I'm not saying don't go to the GP as well, because if you had a broken leg, nobody would expect you to run a marathon. If you've got depression, the same applies. Anxiety, the same applies. So I'm not trying to put people off going to see their GP at all. Please do that too. But there are in-house resources that you can probably get to quicker, which can be complementary to the GP experience.
Yes, exactly. And if they're there, why not take advantage of them? Don't try to be a hero and just try to suppress any issues that you have. Like Louise, like you said, I think it's best to start talking about it, because then you're making it less for yourself, less of a burden, less of a big stone hanging over you. The weight of it all. So, any last tips or advice that you can offer to the students in terms of what can they do to stay academic?
So just to pick up on the point we were talking about before, just so students know, anything they tell to the SPA service is totally confidential. It doesn't come back. If they're worried it's going to come back to their tutors, it doesn't. So to stay academic, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, I'm afraid.
I don't mind.
Go to your lectures, go to your seminars, engage, talk to your tutors, be that your academic tutors or your personal tutor. All of that is really, really important. If you do get called to an academic practice hearing, hopefully you're going to have taken all these tips so you never get called to one. It's an invitation. It's not like a birthday party invitation. You can't refuse it. You have to come, and there's no party bag at the end of it. I'm really sorry, or cake. But two pieces of advice if you get called to a hearing. As I've said before, tell the truth from the beginning. But prior to coming to the hearing, get representation from DSU. They will give you great advice as your independent advisor. They are totally independent from us. They are working for you. And the best outcome will come if you get that DSU representation. And make sure you are informed about what good academic practice is. So DSU have on their website, they have information about good academic practice. The library have a great tool on good academic practice. It's just on their homepage, and it's called Good Academic Practice Library Guides at DMU. And it's got this really intricate little wheel that somebody's obviously spent hours creating. It appeals to me because it's really colourful, and I know we both like colour, don't we? Ironic for two barristers wearing black today, but we do both like colour in general. But
Yes, yeah,
funnily enough, don't know how that happened. But it's got some really good information on things like time management, good note taking, and effective referencing. So it can give you all the tips. Obviously, in any general guides, just to put it out there, a general guide, just be careful that you're always going back to Oscola, because the majority of the world does Harvard, we do Oscola. So if there are any references to Harvard there, please keep away from that. But there's some really, really great tips. And I think by feeling more confident that you are doing the right things can take away the anxiety that students sometimes feel. Because I know we both want you through this brilliant scheme that you've started running. And all of us as tutors want students to do the very best they possibly can. And I'm going to finish on an anecdote, if I may. Two
Yes,
students
please.
many years ago who were in an academic practice hearing with me for collusion. And they were friends from school. They had relied upon one another too much, and they'd basically written the piece of work together. So it was like reading in duplicate. They changed the odd bit. And obviously they were found to have committed academic misconduct, and there was a penalty that followed. But they still were at the university. It was in their second year. And I remember them coming to see me in their third year and saying, we never thought we'd do this, but thank you, because we would have never found our own voices. We would never have been able to work independently. And when they ultimately graduated, and they did both graduate with good degrees, one was one classification above than the other, but they could be proud of that because they knew it was their own work. And they were really proud. And I was really proud when one of them, a few years later, sent me copies of her wedding photos and to keep in touch. So I never want to see students in those hearings if possible. But if I do, I want it to be a learning process so that they can get the best degree they possibly can at the end of it.
Gosh, thank you. And thank you for sharing that story. It's quite uplifting to know that students, there's like this epiphany or this light bulb effect that happens. Sometimes it does happen in our lives. You bang your head and then you try not to go there in the future again. And situations like this, if it has happened to you, because, you might listen to it and you're one of those students that has had something like this happen. You can always change. Okay, so just do your best, not someone else's. Well, thank you so much, Louise, for coming on the podcast and for enlightening us, especially that you've got that key position within the university at the MU, not just within the law school, but also as part of the entire university when it comes to APOs, not calling them academic offences, I understand, academic misconduct. So thank you for sharing all of that with us, and all the best with you guys, with your assessments and submissions and anything else like that you've got happening now or in the near future, because now we're in block teaching, so you'll forever be focusing on some sort of assessment. So whenever you're listening to this, it will be applicable to you and your peers. I'm going to say goodbye, Louise. If you
Thanks,
want to say
Eleanor.
goodbye. Yeah, thank you so much for volunteering for this, and hopefully we'll see you again at some in some other podcast
I hope
if I
so.
have my way.
You always do.
All right, thank you, and goodbye, everyone.